starvation, and the Hamas leadership elected to fight, even though the truth be told, there was a symbolic resistance that they engaged in. Well, what did happen in Gaza? On December 27th, Israel invaded, and 22 days later, there were new ceasefires put into place. But what happened during those 22 days? We're often told, and in fact, virtually everybody nowadays refers back to what they call the Gaza War. There was a war in Gaza. That's what even decent people referring to those events call it, the Gaza War. And Israel itself says, if there was death in Gaza, if there was destruction in Gaza, well, that typically happens in wars. We all know that death and destruction attend wars. And if innocents got killed, if civilian infrastructure got destroyed, well, Israel says, we all know that happens in the fog of war. That in war, split-second decisions have to be made. There is a fog. You can't be certain about where you're directing your fire. You can't be certain whether it's innocents or combatants, whether it's military infrastructure or civilian infrastructure that's being targeted. But was there a war in Gaza? After the events in Gaza, the Israelis were very pleased with themselves. They went around saying, now we've shown those Arabs who's who and what's what. Because the Arabs were getting a little bit too uppity, especially those characters in Lebanon, the Hezbollah. In July, August 2006, they had inflicted a serious military defeat on Israel, and Israel was very upset by the outcome of the Lebanon war. They were worried that what they called their deterrence capacity had been diminished. Deterrence capacity is one of those expressions that makes people's eyes roll. There are so many syllables, and what could it possibly mean? All it means is the Arab world's fear of Israel. And Israel was very concerned that as a result of the defeat inflicted on it by the party of God, that now their deterrence capacity had been diminished. The Arabs no longer feared it. The head of the Hezbollah, Sheikh Nasrallah, he kept making these speeches and saying that the Arabs are no longer afraid of Israel. He taunted Israel and said, if you want to attack again, if you attack again, we'll defeat you again. And so after the Gaza massacre, the Israelis were very pleased with themselves because they said, now we've restored our deterrence capacity. The Arabs are afraid of us because we won the war in Gaza. We won the war in Gaza. But then along came an Israeli strategic analyst, and he said, it's very dangerous for Israel to believe it won the war, but there was no war. In reality, not a single battle was fought during the 22 days of fighting. An Israeli foreign ministry official, he said there was no war. Hamas sat in its bunkers and came out when it was all over. Well, what did happen in Gaza? On a military plane, it's pretty straightforward. Israel began with what was called the air phase of the attack. And by the end of the 22 days, it had flown about 3,000 missions over Gaza. Every plane returned. Not a single plane was downed. Not a single plane was damaged. Which is not all too surprising, because the Palestinians had no anti-aircraft defenses. After the first week, Israel launched its ground invasion of Gaza. The Israelis were equipped with special night fighting equipment. Hamas couldn't even see them, let alone engage in battle with them. So, what did happen in Gaza? In fact, we have some very excellent testimony on what happened. What in a legal jargon would be called unimpeachable testimony. Testimony which you can't doubt. You cannot doubt its truthfulness. It's the testimony of the Israeli soldiers about what they experienced when they were in Gaza. And after the attack on Gaza, many soldiers came forward and they gave witness to what happened. So here's what the soldiers had to say. Soldier, there was nothing there, ghost towns, except for some livestock, nothing moved. Soldier, most of the time it was boring. There were not really too many events. Soldier, I did not see one single Arab the whole time we were there, that whole week. Soldier, everyone was disappointed about not engaging anyone. Soldier, usually we did not see a living soul, except for our soldiers, of course, not a soul. Soldier, go ahead, ask the other soldiers how often they encountered combatants in Gaza. Nothing, no one. Soldier, there was supposed to be a tiny resistance force upon entry, but there just wasn't. There were no battles in Gaza. There was no enemy in the field. There was no foe to tangle with. But that's only half the story. The other half of the story, it's easy enough for anybody here to check. All you have to do is go home, turn on your computer, and then enter under the Google search "breaking the silence," the words "breaking the silence." And up on your screen will come this compendium, this collection of testimonies by Israeli soldiers. And then when you have that collection on your screen, that document on your screen, all you have to do is go to the search mechanism and enter the word insane. And if you enter the word insane, it'll come up once, twice, 3 times, insane, 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 6 times, 7 times. Soldier after soldier says, we used insane amounts of firepower in Gaza. We used insane amounts of firepower in Gaza. We used insane amounts of firepower in Gaza. No battles, no enemy in the field, but we used insane amounts of firepower in Gaza. One soldier said, this was firepower such as I had never known. There were blasts all the time. The earth was constantly shaking. Another soldier said, on the ground you hear these thunderous blasts all day long. I mean, not just tank shelling, which is a tune we've long gotten used to, but blasts that actually rocked the outpost, to the extent that some of us were ordered out of the house we were quartered in for fear it would collapse. The Israelis had commandeered Palestinian homes in Gaza. They're firing into the horizon. But these insane amounts of firepower were actually causing the ground underneath them to quake. And so they were told to leave the houses for fear the houses would collapse on their heads.